Welcome everybody. Unfortunately, I can't see any of you, but if you're used to the technology today, that's how it goes. So all I can see is my screen. If you wish to double click on the presentation that you're seeing on the screen, then that will become larger and my face will disappear off to the side or the corner, and you'll hopefully get a better view of the presentation. For any of you who were in Mark's presentation just now from Modus, this kind of it's very much the same territory, but perhaps a different flavour. So a little bit of background about me. I've been working for over 30 years now as a finance director. The hair's rapidly disappearing. I've been running my own company now for 16 years, providing services to entrepreneurial, ambitious businesses as a virtual FD CFO. And that's really come into its own, obviously, in the last few weeks. As a company, we also provide bookkeeping services for SMEs and can help with kind of year-end accounts and things like that. We work almost exclusively with a software package called Xero, which many of you will know. And we're very proud to be members of B4 and a founding partner of Oxfordshire Voice. Very pleased to be here at Bio 2020. Would have loved to have been kind of with everybody, but here we are. Virtual is almost just as good. So what I want to talk about is, where do we go from here? What's next? Should we be even planning for business growth? Well, on the screen at the moment is a little graph which you can draw your own conclusions, but it's basically the world stock market indexes and the various events marked on there, pandemics, epidemics, call them what you will, that have happened in the past. The advent of HIV, pneumonic plague, interesting SARS actually happening at the bottom of a dip. But the general trend, as you can see, and we know this about stock markets, is that there is this general upward trend. And after every major event, whatever it is that we put on here, and even if we track this map back many, many years, we'd be starting to see the same thing. So at some point, we are going to see growth and more expansion, even though this one has perhaps been more global than many of the others. So what I'd like to do today is quickly whiz through 5 key C's to consider when we're moving our businesses forward. There's a great quote from Walt Disney, not best known for his kind of business advice, but many years ago he said, "I've heard there's going to be a recession. I've decided not to participate." And that's very much where I find myself. If we're going to have a recession, and I've seen one or two in my time, then really I don't want to be part of that. So 5 C's, and let's look at the first one. Well, no prizes for guessing. The first one is cash. And ideally what all of us need to be trying to do is building a cash buffer. Many businesses have taken out government guaranteed loans in the course of the last few weeks. I've helped some of the businesses that I work with collectively to raise just over 1.1 million in either CBILS or bounce back loans. But the key thing to remember with those is they are exactly that. They are loans, and they're debt that is going to have to be repaid unless the business goes under, starting in about 12 months' time. There's no capital to pay now, there's no interest to pay now, but all of a sudden in 12 months' time, those debts are going to have to start being repaid. And that's on top of any deferred self-assessment tax payments that people have missed making in July, which have been deferred to January next year, and any VAT that their businesses may have deferred that's going to fall due for payment by the 31st of March next year. So all of a sudden, businesses that aren't necessarily accustomed to carrying debt are going to be in a position where they have debts and they have time to repay them. So it's really important to plan ways of building a cash buffer, not only to tackle those debts, but to allow our businesses to thrive. Remember, 40% of business failures are due to lack of cash flow. Now, Parkinson's principle says that work expands to fill the time available for its completion, and exactly the same applies to cash. As your business does grow and cash accumulates, then Sod's Law says, and Parkinson's principle says, you will find new ways to spend that cash, and much of it will inevitably be on non-critical costs. Many of the businesses we work with have got into the habit of siloing their cash when it comes in. So set aside money for VAT and taxes, then for debt repayments, for investment in innovation, and only then are you left with money for paying your staff costs and other overheads. If you put cash aside as it comes in, you will find a way to run your business on what's left. Typically, surplus equals complacency. The next C is credit control, and that's so closely linked to cash flow, obviously. Research by Xero, the account software that we use in conjunction with PayPal, back in 2019, showed that in an average month, almost half of invoices issued by small businesses are paid past their due date, on average about 14 days late. So on any given day in February 2019, the average small business was owed about £23,000 in late payments, and that had increased by 17% since the previous February. As owners of businesses, we're spending approximately 2 working weeks a year chasing late payments, and that's a massive loss of an irreplaceable resource that could be spent winning new customers, adopting the latest technology, or, more importantly, as we've discovered over the last 10-12 weeks, spending time at home with our family. Small and medium business economy could be hit at any one time with an average deficit of 131 billion. We're hearing lots of numbers with billions at the moment as the Chancellor stands up and tells us that this scheme is costing that. And that is every small and medium business being owed, as I said earlier, around £23,000 at any one time. That's money that could fund a new website design, could actually pay for a new employee, or even, if it was required, a new company car. As entrepreneurs and business owners, we're struggling with our own personal well-being because nearly a half of those interviewed said that late payments were having a negative effect on mental health, and just over 40% were awake at night worrying about their business's cash flow. So when you're not paid what you're owed, you lose the ability to choose how you spend that money and how you put it aside for future use. And there's a domino effect, as we all know. So what we're advising our clients to do is to negotiate shorter payment terms with their clients. If you have a long payment window, there's much more of a chance that an invoice will get overlooked or lost. And it's best to have these discussions and confirm the payment terms as part of that initial agreement. So if you're starting working with new clients or new customers as we emerge from this crisis, bring that conversation right to the front. None of us like talking about money, but it's really important to do. When an invoice is overdue, send a reminder or make a phone call straight away. And don't forget to invoice when you can. I still see so many companies sending invoices out at the end of the month. So costs, the third C. Many of us will equate cutting costs with doing things cheaply, but there's many other speakers here at Bio 2020 who will testify to the damage that can be done to your brand if we cut costs in the wrong way. So look carefully at your costs. Look for areas where costs have increased recently, areas where costs are a lot higher than others, and particularly look at costs that vary when you don't expect them to. And most decent accounting packages will let you as a business owner, or you and your accountant, or you and your bookkeeper do this really easily. Here's a quick snapshot that we ran from a bit of demo software that we have. And here we've got 4 months expenditure. And we've gone through and we've just highlighted 1 or 2 areas that we'd like to discuss with our team. Why have we suddenly gone from spending very little on marketing to spending £1,667 last month, and then all of a sudden to £7,000? What are we doing to control that expenditure and to measure its effect? What happened to subscriptions? Is that just an accounting entry where it's an annual subscription and we haven't spread it across the year? Let's look at it and let's challenge the subscriptions anyway. Are they ones that we really need? If you go through the accounts with your team and look at anything that falls into the 3 categories, then so you understand them. If you have a budget, then even better, because your account system should let you compare what you've actually spent with your budget. Having done that first stage of analysis and deep dive with your team, then look at your costs in a different way. What's mission critical and highly valued? What's highly valued but not mission critical? And what is neither? Particularly now that you will find that costs have moved from one to another in this time. The mission critical, highly valued costs, these are the ones where you look for economies, but certainly not at the expense of negative brand impact. For the highly valued non-mission critical costs, find ways to reduce them, changing from branded products to white label, etc. And for those in the last category, find a way to eliminate them. Do you really need that magazine subscription? Why are we paying for multiple software packages which do the same thing? If we're going to stay in mostly work from home mode, then what costs are no longer needed in our premises? A company that I spent some time with a couple of years ago used to run events, and in about 2011, they took the decision that instead of putting sweets out for workshop delegates, they'd put macadamia nuts out, a nice little touch to improve the customer experience. A couple of years later, they were hosting 150 workshops a year, and they took a long, hard look at their expenses. By doing exactly this kind of line-by-line expense review, they suddenly realised that they were spending £30,000 a year on nuts. Needless to say, they took the view that this was a non-mission critical expense. It was quickly dropped, and nobody noticed. The lesson here, and it's a salient lesson for me as an accountant, as an FD, is you can't always rely on your accountant to raise the questions about the way you're spending your money. You are the person who's closest to it, and you know best. The fourth C is business continuity, and in no time has this been more significantly challenged than 10, 11 weeks ago when we entered into lockdown. We've all heard of business continuity plans, and we probably all thought they were meant for those bigger businesses down the road. Then along came COVID-19. It's not a complicated business, and if it isn't complicated, what does it look like? It's going to have three elements. It's going to talk about our infrastructure, our management, and our policy. It will outline what we'll do in terms of cash flow. It will detail our policy around employees and communications. More importantly, it will provide a guide as to who does what, so we're not running around like headless chickens. It will outline who decides what. Again, really important to have those key authorities laid out. It will deal with working in the cloud. Now, you've probably rewritten that section if you hadn't before in the course of the last 10 weeks. As for the next section, it will explain your working from home policy. It will list key suppliers and how your supply chain will be maintained, and it will assess risk. I don't think any of us saw a pandemic coming, and it's not your everyday risk, but at least now it's something that we will continue to build into our plans. So in assessing risk, we're going to look at the likelihood, the impact, and how we mitigate it. So actually, if you think about it, it's probably all there already. You've had to do most of that in the last 11 weeks. It's now just a case of putting it down in a document, so it's there for next time, when you lose power, when your premises are flooded, or whatever. So we've looked at our cash and our credit control. We've looked at our costs and the importance of being prepared, how we can make our lives as business owners much easier so we can react and make changes to our business plans faster and on a more informed basis. In order to do that, we need a good set of tools. So we come to our final C, which is confidence. Now, nowadays, there's absolutely no need to be constrained to looking at your numbers in spreadsheets and standard reports. In fact, most business owners have a red fog that perhaps comes over their eyes when they're presented with yet another pack of 10 pages of spreadsheets and numbers. Nowadays, there are a myriad of apps that will read the data in your account system and present it in a really easy to understand way, a way that allows you to spot trends easily, with the facility to project forward and see the effects of what if. there is no better time than now to take a look at, one, what's possible so that you are right on top of your numbers. And then two, as lockdown eases, you can then start to see how your future cash flow and profitability are affected. If you haven't already taken advantage of the government-backed funding, whether you're a sole trader, whether you're a limited company or a partnership, but are considering doing so, it's really key that you have a real understanding of your business's performance. And tools like this will give you the confidence to decide whether debt is the right answer for your business at this particular time. There is no more important thing than to be right on top of your numbers. It's exactly what Mark from Modus was saying in the previous session, and it's a phrase that I trot out regularly with all my clients, and hopefully they are all right on top of their numbers. So, just a quick reminder then of the 5 C's. First of all, cash. Obviously, cash is king. We've heard that. Cash, though, and profit are 2 totally different things. You can run a business that is making a substantial profit. If you haven't got cash, then unfortunately, you are likely to go under. In order to keep the cash coming in, we need to be right on top of our credit control. If it's not something that you're comfortable doing, then get somebody else to help you. Somebody else within your business, a colleague, maybe even somebody from your accountant. You can outsource a service like that. As I say, sometimes you don't want to ruin the client service relationship by talking about money. But actually, if you get it right out there in the first place, it becomes less of a difficult thing to talk about. Costs, take a long, hard look at your costs. Make sure you're spending money where it's appropriate, where it's mission critical and highly valued. And look at those are things that right down at the other end of the scale to make sure that they're not eating up your cash. Make sure that you're prepared for every eventuality, or at least every eventuality that you can contemplate, by having everything documented and your plans written down. And finally, so that you have the confidence to continue to run your business, make sure you are right on top of the numbers. As we go through this next period, which is likely to be a recession, remember what Walt Disney said: I've heard there's going to be a recession and I've decided not to participate.